Welcome to Darkwoods Paranormal, brought to you and produced by Unbox Media LLC. I am your host, Gabriel Von Graves, and alongside me, the enigmatic Raven Knight. Together, we journey beyond the veil of the ordinary into a world where reality meets the supernatural. Each week, we guide you through tales of the relentless spirits, shadowy cryptids, and conspiracy theories that challenge what we think we know. Whether drawn to folklore, urban legends, or forces that have haunted humanity for centuries, Darkwoods Paranormal offers stories that captivate and disturb. Stories that might just keep you awake at night. So listen closely as we explore the secrets buried in shadows. Step into the darkness with us. This is Darkwoods Paranormal. Let the journey begin.
Welcome to Darkwoods Paranormal. I'm Raven Knight, and today we have an extra special episode for you. Recently, we were invited to visit one of the most haunted locations in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Shaker's Cigar Bar. Known as one of America's most haunted bars, Shaker's has a rich and chilling history that has attracted paranormal investigators and thrill seekers from all over the world. Originally built in 1894 as a barrel house, it later became a Prohibition-era speakeasy, where stories of organized crime, murder, and mysterious disappearances began to weave themselves into the building's walls. Today, it stands as a hotspot for paranormal activity, with reports of ghostly encounters, eerie footsteps, and unexplained phenomena. During our visit, we had the opportunity to sit down with Bob Weiss, the owner and historian of Shaker's Cigar Bar. Bob's firsthand accounts of the building's history and paranormal experiences are nothing short of extraordinary. This episode is part of a multi-series, so be sure to follow along as we share our unforgettable experience. And as always, if you'd like to catch up on past episodes or share your own paranormal story with us, visit us online at darkwoodsparanormal.com or send us an email at darkwoodsparanormalpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's dive into part one of our interview with Bob Weiss at Shaker's Cigar Bar. Stay tuned for part two. It's one you won't want to miss. So much for
Missy, thank you for having me here.
I'm so excited to actually talk to you in person.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of had a on and off again communication via chat, but this is good. Now I know a little bit about the history, but I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about the history of Shaker's Bar and why it's actually so much history, and if you could just kind of start with that.
The onus on me, of course, to carry the program here, right? Okay. So, this beautiful building was built in 1894, and we served as a cooperage house for Schlitz, the largest brewer in the world at that time. So, Cooper made wooden barrels, okay? And they were incredibly busy. This is one of the 37 different Coopers that Schlitz had in this part of Milwaukee. Prohibition comes, and there's no reason to have people making beer barrels anymore because there's no beer going anywhere, right? So this building was dormant for a couple of years. Then in 1924, the Capones come up, Al Capone and family, and acquire this property. And Bottles Capone, which is Al's brother, was known as Bottles because he developed this concept of not only bootlegging bottles in, but also of creating an environment where the officials would think he's just making soda water or something like that, right? So they did that in the front of the house downstairs, fake walls, of course, and that confused everybody. And they created something called the ABC Bottling Company. You can still find the wooden cases from ABC Soda Bottling Company, and that's what took place here. Now, in the back of the room downstairs, that beautiful bar was put there in 1924 by Al Capone, and the Italian marble on the base, the mahogany. It's a gorgeous little piece, and that, of course, was their primary speakeasy. Entry through the back doors, big gorillas back there. You saw the little landing level above that, where the young ladies would be showcasing a little titillation, showcasing the wares. So you came here for the, the gin or something else, right? And yet you're looking, well, since I'm here, And then they had another fake wall that would lead you upstairs to the brothels. Now, you walked up that staircase and you saw different things on the stair cleats, right? That's the actual menu from 1924 with the 1924 pricing, right?
Wow.
And the level below us was where the B girls would work, and the madam would be there. She'd check you in. You'd have the fluffers that are getting you prepared for the main event. If you didn't have a lot of money, they'd just satisfy you downstairs, then you're on your way, right? Upstairs, there was the A girl, and she generally had the run of this space by herself, and she was very exclusive. We had pictures at one point of Cords and Duesenbergs outside. Somebody borrowed that for one of the documentary companies and never brought it back. But those cars would be lingering outside. And the joint next door was called Hotel Frisco. And they are adamant that people that own that, the wife is still alive at 97 or 98, and adamant that it wasn't a brothel, but it was a rooming house for young girls whose uncles would visit on a regular basis. Call it what you will, right? It's the same thing. Now, going back before that, from 1885 until 1910, Milwaukee had the reputation as the best entertainment city in the entire country. So people from St. Louis, New York, Chicago, wherever would come here to participate in our brothels and gin mills and whatever else took place. So everything around City Hall was like brothel zone. And in fact, the program Gunsmoke was stylized after Miss Kitty. Kitty Williams was our primary brothel madam. And then, of course, she had a long career in Gunsmoke as well. But she ran the most exclusive brothels here. And they literally had these little Viennese quartets that would play inside. It's all marble foyers. They're beautiful spaces. But as you went down the block, 3 to 4 blocks down, you went down from this really high-end experience to something less than that, to literally, they call them the stalls, and because people having sex with horses and dogs and whatever else. So kind of Caligula, but really nothing has changed over the course of time, right? But in 1910, David Rose, who was the mayor at that point and a very large proponent of the brothels, that literally you walk outside of City Hall, you stumble into a brothel, and the socialists came to power and they didn't like what was taking place because they wanted more of a familial situation taking place. And they shuttered the brothels. Well, brothels don't go out of business. They merely moved. They moved down here to Walker's Point. So Shakers is in Walker's Point, one of the 3 original parts of Milwaukee discovered by George Walker. And after Walker was Solomon Juneau and Byron Kilbourne. You might have read about the wars that they had taking place where literally they would start shooting at each other across the bridges. Bridges don't quite line up. And horses died, livestock died. People, weren't hit, but just to get their point across, who really was the originator of Milwaukee. They all served as mayor at different time, but George Walker in Walker's Point was the first guy. Wow. So that's the story of how the brothels evolved. Now, why this was then Brothel Row.
Wow. Well, thank you for that.
Now, before that, this is the site of one of the 3 original cemeteries in the state of Wisconsin for non-Indigenous people. The Indian burial grounds were that side of 2nd Street along the canal that's there, Milwaukee's 3 primary canals. And they were lovely, but of course they got bulldozed down because progress moves on, right? And if we were down south, let's say, for example, we're in Key West or we're in New Orleans, we would maintain a inner city structure of cemeteries. Well, they don't do that in the north, so they move the remains mostly to the Forest Home Cemetery, which is about 8 miles that away, right? So we have used ground-penetrating radar from Discovery World, our good friends there, that we borrowed it from, and you will find bone fragments downstairs, as you would expect, until you get all the way in the back of the building, and there in the eastern quadrant, there are now 2 artificial skeletons to mark where underneath we have found 2 complete male skeletons, which go back to about 1924, coincidentally. And what happened in 1924? Well, that's when the Capones came here and acquired the property. So it's not unusual for that ilk of society to take people and to put them underneath cement. Sure. Jimmy Hoffa. And even not too far back, we had a situation where we had a guy named Max Adonis. So one-armed Max Adonis was the maitre d' of one of the better restaurants in Milwaukee, which happened to be Italian, Giovanni's, the best veal that was available in the Midwest, probably. And Max had a bit of a little gambling issue and maybe a little bit of powder issue as well. And Max might have owed some money to some people, and they took unfavorably upon Max not paying them back. So there were a couple of incidents where people would randomly shoot, shotguns inside of Giovanni's. And then one day in particular, they happened to catch Max there early in the morning, 8 o'clock or something, closing out the registers the night before. And there's also a lovely young lady who's a cleaning lady. Now, she's Mexican, which might factor into this. So they caught Max there, and as opposed to 2 weeks earlier when they used the shotguns to blow up his Cadillac, this time they got Max, right? Now Max is dead. Unfortunately for her, let's call her Rosa. The young lady, Rosa's there as the cleaning person, and she sees this. She's still there when the police arrive, but then after that, she just disappeared. We hope she went back to Mexico, but that's not necessarily the case, right? So then our mayor at the time was John Norquist, and he went out to Chicago. He's the head of the this interesting concept to eliminate cars and improve the standard of living by thinking that we're Europe or something, and we don't need cars, we don't need any of this progressive kind of thing. So it's new urbanism, and he's in charge of that. But while he was here, he had several houses, as every good politician does, and not the ones that his wife stayed in. And one of those was on Scott Street on the near south side of town. So now John has moved on, matriculated after his little situation with one of his co-workers with an apple and some other sundry things taking place in city chambers. So John leaves office and goes to Chicago, naturally. And then right down the block from him, like within half a block or so of his house, somebody acquires that property. And then as they've moved in, they realize that there is some irregularity in the basement floor. Well, they had that dug up, and oddly enough, there's 2 bodies in there that are not decomposed yet, but 2 bodies. Sure. And so MPD is there, and the determination is made that the DNA that they have and or their fingerprints, oddly enough, match up with those left behind with Giovanni's and the shooting of Max Adonis. So again, we have people that are entombed underneath cement. So there's a consistent theme taking place here, right? Well, keep in mind, and the way I approach is that, to me, essence precedes existence, and then to me, therefore, essence succeeds. So the energy that's you continues on. Your shell is gone, right? But for whatever reason, energy is drawn to this location, maybe the cemetery, maybe something else. We're told by different spiritualists that we have myriad portals that are here as well. We have resident spirits and we have other things. But these people that work in the brothels are showmen, right, or show women.
Sure.
And as performers, they, I think, want to continue forth that energy that goes along with that really made them happy when they were alive, right? And that's how I kind of justify this. And I think that they then want to continue what they had going on. In her case, Molly Brennan grew up with Patrick Harvey, and they had this relationship before he became unhinged. Sure. And Sam the Bouncer obviously was an important part of her life for a couple of years by keeping the miscreants out up until her former boyfriend. And that kind of makes sense to me to a certain degree. And I think that they had to have come to terms with this as a crime of passion. But again, using the rods, we interact on a regular basis, and they all seem content to be here. And you could tell, though, sometimes there's some friction, and she'll be in a different part of the room than he is in. But that's like any other relationship too, right?
Sure.
So is she necessarily happy about it? I would guess not. But is she kind of complicit to a certain degree with that? Because this is her story, and he's part of her story, and she wouldn't have this story if it wasn't for him.
Right.
So, the time heals some wounds, and other things just are what they are, I suppose, right?
Right. That's That's an interesting way to look at it,
Yeah,
though.
okay.
Yeah. You actually mentioned something which was part of a question I was going to ask you, but we can do it right now because you kind of brought it up a little bit. Some of the stuff that I've read, you have the burial ground, you have the Capones, you have Dahmer, which we will talk about in a little bit as well. But do you feel like certain locations draw a certain energy to it? When I'm reading about the history of this place, it kind of brings me to the Cecil Hotel, for example. You know that a lot of things happen at the Cecil Hotel, and with the Cecil, it was the Night Stalker that often visited. So do you feel like certain locations are just able to bring those kinds of energies in? And
There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever. So we also have tours in Savannah, Georgia. We have Los Angeles. Los Angeles, California overall has a disproportionate number of nutbag serial killers, right? But you can go to these things where we do the tours in Redondo Beach and Hermosa, where Bittaker and Norris, the toolbox killers, reigned, right? Just insidious monsters. They'd grab young girls and women off the street, and they'd rape them, they'd dissect them while they're still alive from their toolbox, and then they'd put ice picks in their ears to try to kill them, dump them in the Hollywood Hills. But you can sense in different locations that something unpleasant took place. And I've had the good fortune to travel around the world, and especially when you get yourself into parts of Central and South America and or in Europe, and like northern Spain has got so much of the history of the Spanish Inquisition that's there. They have museums set up for this as well. You go to these museums and you are overcome with, I am at least, of the sensation of the trauma and the pain that took place, and you get close to some of these objects of torture, and it is profound, right? And there is it was the Red Castle, and it was notorious, kind of like an H.H. Holmes kind of thing, for the number of murders that took place there, mostly of women, and the anguish that's in the rooms. And I have experienced, being there, and at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, and I will see something, the lights are off, but you'll see something darker than dark that's moving through. And what they do in most places in Europe and a lot of the world now is that they have motion detection for lights. So if they're not being utilized to save energy, the lights are off, right? So I've always, I learned long ago, I've always got a flashlight by my bed, right? So I would, get up and I'd follow this. You see this dark blob kind of thing moving, and it goes through the doorway. You'd open the door, the lights outside are completely off, but you can see this dark object that is moving away from you, right? And if you step across the threshold, then the lights come on, and then it's gone, right? But I think that very definitely places do, for whatever reason, some places capture that essence, that energy, and spirits are drawn to it. And whether that means that something good took place or something horrific took place, it was significant enough that it demands their attention, right? And again, South America is rife with this as well, because especially get into like Colombia, where any number of untoward things took place, or Guatemala, where the drug cartels have come up, and people are just a commodity that are dispatched on a regular basis, right? And you can wander around, and even going back to the Mayan ruins, there are some of those where they had more sacrifices taking place, and you don't have to know what took place there. You can feel
Sure.
that things are different there. So I even think that buildings like this one, for example, other old buildings that have this other, I don't want to say ability, but this other draw for spirits, the building itself takes on its own life, and the building also has the energy, the cumulative energy of 100 some odd years, and more so in Europe, that energy is just there with those buildings. Sure. Always. And I think that here's the thing about, the Western civilization, especially in America, is that we don't believe it unless I can reach out and touch you, I can see you, right? And I think that in the rest of the world, and it doesn't matter if you're in an Asian country or somewhere else, there's a different elementalist belief in things. And certainly I spend as much time as I can in South America, but you have a whole different perspective on that. Along that same line, I've gone through both voodoo ceremonies in Jamaica and in Santeria in Cuba, which they generally don't let Caucasians go through, but you can't possibly spend the amount of time that I did in these and not be affected and not have an understanding there's something more than just the three of us that are here right now.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
Okay. I actually, that makes me think of the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Have you had any people that were maybe skeptics come into, say, maybe to stay the night here or even just come into the bar and then later say something to you like, Bob, I've had an experience?
Unquestionably. So as you see, this is kind of representative. So there are like 9 or 10 people on the tour. The majority are female. And they have a tendency to be interested in what's taking place here. And they bring their boyfriends, paramours, husbands, whatever the case might be, who necessarily aren't as inclined to believe when they start the tour. But at the completion, these are the guys who are the most impacted by things like, oh my God, I had no idea. I don't believe in this up till now, and whatever else. Especially when you have the divination rods that we do in the 2.0 tour, it is cathartic in some ways for people. So, but there are those people that are just absolutely locked off, closed off. I don't believe it. I don't care. Whatever else. But there are other people that have a smidgen of a desire to look beyond this, and that is where much of what we do here really makes sense to me, because we're able to show people something beyond what they encountered on a daily basis only because they've not had open minds to it. And along that same line, I've got 4 kids, and there's a gap in between them, but I would bring like the first 2 here after a Saturday night. I'd book out of here like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd bring them back then, Sunday morning at something. We're closing out the tills that I didn't get to the night before. And they would all migrate back to the ladies' room. Well, what's in the ladies' room? You haven't taken the tour, but Elizabeth is the little girl who's there, 8-year-old girl, and she was climbing for apples in this little stand of apple trees in the cemetery that was here. She fell, she broke her neck. So both sets of kids, and we were adamant we would not talk about anything here until they're 12 years old. We would not, whatever. And they're, 4, 5, 6, whatever, and they're running back there. And, it's 20 minutes later, time to go. What are you guys doing? Yeah, we're talking to the little girl back there. I'm like, okay. So kids, same thing with animals. The one time they brought their little Shih Tzu along with them, and it was just, wide-eyed, the whole thing, backing up, because it too sees and senses things that we don't. And I think that people, by and large, have the mechanism to perceive, to see things, but we shuttered them down. In grade school, we shut all that down, right? And we've done such a terrible job with education in this country anyway, but that, to me, is also part of that. And we don't allow people to think outside the realm, and that shuts them down for things. And women are obviously built differently than men, and they have different emotional constructs, and they're able to be receptive to different things than we are. And it takes a bit more for the standard guy to get over that little hurdle kind of thing and admit that there's something else there. And that's why, things like the X-Files, I think, were phenomenal, because they got people thinking just a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to do. Everybody needs a little catalyst for something to understand there's more to life than just what you see. And as much time as I could spend in a rainforest or the jungle or somewhere else, whatever primordial thing is going on there, it really resonates with me, and more people should experience that. And just like, same kind of thing, I've long said that people who are politicians in America should be forced to spend like 3 months in France. And I'm not saying that France has got the best system ever, but it's a much more humane style of living, a different appreciation for things, and maybe we would have a better lifestyle here in some ways. And certainly in the last 30 years, things have eroded in our great society that are not conducive in the way that maybe we could be and should be after thousands of years, multiple millennia, that we should treat ourselves better. And I think if you had a better appreciation for those ancestors that went before us, Native Americans are all about this, right?
Sure.
We'd have a better appreciation for where we are today, and maybe we'd treat each other better than we do today. Anyway, that's that.
I know that you've owned this place for 30
6
years. Or
weeks.
you've been here for 30 years, 6.5 weeks or so.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about what your first paranormal experience was and what made you.
Here or mine overall?
In general, like it overall.
Okay, so
I'm assuming it.
I'm 4 or 5 years old, and there's a massive snowstorm, and we lived in a duplex in Milwaukee above my grandparents. My grandparents owned several restaurants. My grandfather was a master chocolatier, but he was also a bookie. And he sponsored a lot of people from Greece and Italy that came here. And every Saturday there was a line of men that are there paying him back, right, for bringing them over, and or for the whatever bookie type things he did. And then on Sundays, my grandmother, the old Greek lady, would be there, and she's reading coffee grounds for people, and she'd have just a line of women that wanted their, I'm not saying future, but whatever told for them, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I grew up with. So again, I'm 4 or 5, and there's a massive snowstorm, and my mom is home, and we're shoveling out front. So she and my grandfather are shoveling, and he goes down, massive heart attack. So it's before the paramedics were in existence, and the rescue squad took forever to get there. He's already blue in the face, right? So as you see it approach, the wagons, fishtailing, whatever else, get him loaded in the wagon, and neighbors come out and push him away, and again, he's gone, right? So I'm, again, 4 or 5, and it really doesn't hit home with me what that is, except he's gone. And so that night, my bedroom was off our kitchen, and I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and there at the kitchen table, 15 feet away, is my grandfather. It's like this neon green, glowing, full apparition kind of a thing, right? And I'm sure I'm just kind of agog, and he kind of waves me over, and I stand by him, and I felt okay about his passing. And I lingered there for a minute. He kind of waves me on. I go to the bathroom, and he waves me goodbye. So now it's the next morning, and there's already a mass of people that are downstairs to pay their respects to my grandmother, and the priest is there, whatever else. But my mom's trying to get me dressed. I'm trying to tell the story. She's trying to get me dressed, trying to tell the story. I finally blurted out enough of this, and just grabs me, and it's still snowing outside, man. So she, down the stairs, around the front, in the front door, and I repeat the story dozens of times to anybody who's there. So that was my first experience. But as such, again, we'll go back about the Greek part of my family. I'm sensitive to all sorts of things like that. I don't go looking for them anymore. I happen to be in places, and I can feel and sense and whatever, and get the backstory. And Europe was really a big part of that, because I wanted no backstory on anything. And my girlfriend at the time and I fell into all sorts of places. But the same thing we've done in Savannah and other things that really kind of got us moving in a whole different direction with that. And she was Native American, or partially Native American, so she had her own subset of things with her as well. But my first experience here was in 1986. So when I acquired the property, it didn't quite look like this. The back bar was there. The front was a complete mishmash of other things. And the cat who owned this was an antiquities dealer, thief. And he spent 16 years that he owned the property, breaking into people's estates, houses, whatever, stained glass, doors, doorknobs. He was the doorknob king in America. He had barrels of doorknobs, man. These beautiful, ornate brass doorknobs. And for the first year I'm open, people are like coming by with things that they stole from somewhere, trying to sell it to me. Thank you, no, But that's the other part of what took place here. So many other things came into the building while Destin owned this. He was a guest of the federal government time and again, because they break into things, he'd be selling them to Red Baron or to Salvage One in Chicago or whatever, across state lines. So that's a federal thing, away for 3 years, whatever. So when when I acquired this in '86, I had a different business called Design Tech Manufacturing, and my partner was Kevin McHale, who's a master carpenter, and we get high-end exotic wood, Bubingas, Koa, Tiger wood, whatever, for the audio industry. And I divested my interest in that company for him to spend the time with me, and we sourced all this old wood from auctions, estates, or salvage thing, whatever you could find it. And we'd rip these things and we'd make it into the front of the house, which kind of mirrored the back of the house, right? And we didn't know anything about the components at the time. We didn't know anything about the haunty things, but from day one, things would move here. So we would have we get into plumbing, we're woodworkers. We get into plumbing, we get into HVAC, we get into electrical. So we'd have those teams that are here working on things. And we're upstairs and we've got major power tools in the middle of the floor. We're just ripping wood, we're doing whatever. And the guys run up from downstairs, did you hear that? Did you hear that? We hear the machines. I'm like, hear what? It sounds like my daughter. It sounds like a woman is screaming, whatever. I'm like, no. They go back down and run up again, and then at some point they just run out of the building, leaving their tools behind, and never came back again. So even when I was finally then open, we would have these big massive guys that are delivering beer barrels, and they take things downstairs. They run upstairs, said, "Yeah, we're not going back downstairs." So they have to call and get another crew to come in to then pick up the beer barrels and service us, whatever else. We've had cops downstairs pull out their sidearms, which you never do, but there's something there that means them harm, right? So you as a woman, you walk down streets and some things are less favorable, right? And you're tingly spider senses, right? So it's the same thing with any other profession that deals with the ne'er-do-wells or something else. You are aware something is there. You don't know what it is, but you're highly suspect of it, and your preservation aspect is going to kick in, right? So we had a number of things take place in the 3 or 3.5 months while we worked 18 hours a day to put this together. We would even at some point go to the corner to get a couple of burgers or something. We're gone for 20 minutes. Only he and I have a key. We're only gone for that period of time. We come back and we've got our equipment that we've left. So the big saws and our rotor stations, whatever else is set up. Sawdust is everywhere, and yet things are moved from where we left them. So nothing has obviously been here because the sawdust is still fresh and sitting in the same place. And that was just the beginning. Every day, literally every day, I see things in the mirrors, in the pictures, in something. There were 2 times that I ran like a schoolgirl from here in 38 years. But I'm generally at peace with things that are here. That doesn't mean they don't get my attention sometimes.
Sure.
But they've been here before I've been here. And you just have to look at that in the right complexion, I suppose.
Sure. Do you feel that kicks up at certain times, like if there's certain seasons or rain?
There's no question at all. So when the weather is inclement, you get more experiences here. And for whatever reason, Friday the 13th, and that might be that the people that come here as well expect something.
Sure.
So, there's kind of a placebo-esque kind of effect maybe, but it doesn't matter because it's more active. Full moons for sure are much more active here. And the month of October is showtime, right? Oh, it is. So yes, there are springs, and with springs you have energy. So with divination rods, generally what they do for those, they'd hold them upside down. They still do this today, but for centuries they find water. Well, water's energy as well. You invert them, and now you have a different psychic response from those same divination rods. And it is incredible, especially the people that are not as psychically orientated or non-believers, who will come and use these and oh my God, I talked to my grandfather, whatever else. So, it's kind of like, careful what you wish for sometimes, because you can find it or it will find you. And it's amazing the amount of activity here, the cemetery obviously, the Capones obviously, and then you do have the Dahmer aspect as well. So there's a lot that goes on here. So Shakers is just alive with all these different things, different components at different times.
Wow. I do have to ask you about managing a haunted space, and how how that could be a challenge in some aspects, and if at any point in time maybe some of the spirits, say Elizabeth or Molly or any of the other spirits that might be here, have interfered with the operations.
Okay, so yes, there's a baby grand piano downstairs at the end of the main back bar, and we don't use that anymore. We used to use that every day for live jazz. It was in the front of the house. We put it in the back of the house, and at one point it was on the opposite side, the east side of the main archway in back, between the area where the really large back room is, and then it goes back towards the, I guess, antechamber kind of thing where the restrooms are, right? So that was back there, and typically on a Friday or Saturday night, and we want to get our butts out of here. We're open until 3:30 in the morning. We want to book, right, at that time. And you would hear the piano start to play. And I've said again, it's not Gershwin, but you'd hear it plunk, plunk, plunk away, right? There's nobody else around. The music stereo's off, blah, blah, blah. You'd hear this, and we lost staff that would just run out the door. Right. Or staff, you got waitresses that are downstairs that are getting stock to restock at night, and then they get touched, they get felt, whatever else. There's nobody else around them, gone, right? Sure. So what we kind of did to get around that is there's like 38 people on staff here, which 33 are female. That's been my thing forever today. And we have them all spend the night up here. They all must spend the night here. Doesn't have to be alone, but spend the night up here. And what we would do is you have to spend 10 minutes in the cellar by yourself. And
get used to the feeling is what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get used to something here. And they all have to know the
Where
backstory.
did you come up with that concept?
Well, they all take a tour first anyway. Right?
I'm just curious.
So that's the first thing, so you know the backstory, you know the history. Right. But I want you to get past the little simple galvanic skin response kind of thing. Yeah. My hairs are standing up. Why? Right. Well, now you know the backstory, right? And I think, and it doesn't work for everybody. Some people, we find out quickly. You're not going to make it. You're going to, I'd rather on the front side you book. Right. But you get a feeling for things that are other than us.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to get that background.
Yeah.
So that's why we do that.
That's very smart.
That is a really smart idea.
So we have things that are shadow people downstairs.
Absolutely.
And you can be there, and you should be there later tonight, but sometimes you see these things that are, again, like I'm talking about in Spain or France, where you've got these things that move through at night that are darker than other. Yep. There's nobody else there, but you see these darker images. But they are not the ones that interact with you. They're not tugging your hair. Right. They're not pushing you into the ice machine. Right. They don't seem to care that we're here. So in my mind, those are interdimensional things, beings if you want, right, or energy sources that are drifting through time and space. Right. I don't think they care about us at all. So that to me is what a shadow person is, as opposed to, here's the nomenclature issue, whether it's going to be a ghost or a spirit, or it's going to be the myriad other things that are on the dark side of that.
You're talking about demons.
Correct.
Okay.
So I suppose if you believe in demons, you have to believe in angels, and or vice versa, right? There's always yin yang. It's nature, right? Yes. So we have resident spirits. We have visiting spirits sometimes. Sometimes the visiting spirits are not conducive to being here, right, and we have to expunge them. So anyway, there was a time that I was up here. It was last summer, and it's somebody else's tour, and they had asked me to come along because things were unusually active up here. And as I'm up here with them, my shirt got actually ripped on the back. There's no one standing behind me, but I've got 3 rips down the back of my shirt at that time. So that entity had to be expunged. Right. And then there was a time that was probably just a few months ago, and CG was one of our tour guides as well. And I'm a chef, so from time to time I'm back in the kitchen, but she came to get me in the kitchen on a Friday night and said, "You've got to come downstairs. There's something, whatever we don't like down here." And I came down, and I've got the divination rods, and there's 15 people in front of me, and Gigi's on one side of me. I got the rods. I'm communicating with something down there. I start off with our resident spirits, probably O'Connor, who's the primary guy that's there. And then I'm talking to the other entity that doesn't belong there, that is not a nice entity. And shortly thereafter, CG is like lurching towards me. My jeans are on fire, and I've kept those jeans. There's a massive hole. There's no one behind me. There's nothing behind me. It's not like somebody with a lit cigar. There's not like an electrical component. There's nothing behind me, but my jeans are on fire. So from time to time, there are things that are a little bit less than pleasant that have to be removed. Unequivocally, I think that when people do die, and again, my background is a little bit different than most people, so I'm not unfamiliar with the topic. How's that? But I do think that when people do die a violent death, that there's more residue that's left behind, and that imprints the area, that imprints any living thing that's around that, whether it's plants or something else. I think everything is impacted by that, and that residue lingers for a while. It could be